I'm JR Demicais. I actually own a consultancy firm in the Philippines. It's a social enterprise model. A year ago, I started the garden business, but I have a different kind of mindset that the whole mission was really to make sure that we help plant parents to thrive in their plant parent journey, because I
Mhm.
think the problem with a lot of gardens are sprouting everywhere in the Philippines, especially during this pandemic.
Yes.
The problem is a lot of plant parents don't have anyone to go in terms of asking questions on what to do with their plants. So
Mhm.
that was one of the few reasons, and a long time vision that I had to really put up the plant shop. But the thing is, you don't have the credibility if you didn't study anything about plants. Number two, if you don't own a plant shop. So the plant
Mhm.
shop comes first. So I'm located in Metro Manila in the Philippines. I'm not so sure if you've been here.
No, I
Um,
haven't been. I'd love to
not,
visit someday.
yeah, and can show you around a lot of plant parents as well.
Mhm.
The other thing is, I own a plant shop garden, and then I've been since the lockdown started for us. I think we're the country that has the longest lockdown among those that were badly hit by COVID. There
Mhm.
was increasing number of people who are interested in plants, and
Yes.
after the lockdown, the problem comes where they don't know how to take care of the plants. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we are. So the name of the garden is Green Hobby.
Mhm. Very nice.
Yeah. So you might want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I'm Darryl Cheng. I created a Houseplant Journal. It's mostly Instagram page, but I also have a YouTube channel. And yeah, I've been doing it now for about 5 years. And throughout that time, very similar mission. Like houseplants were becoming popular. In fact, my story is exactly the same. Where my mom said, "Hey, help me decorate the house with some houseplants." And then she also said, "Oh, but you better figure out how to take care of them, right?"
Mm,
So I did like any good millennial person would do, and researched online. And what I found was very much the same as what you were saying. How people, even when they Google plant advice, I think the things that people read are the same kind of stuff that was written decades ago.
yeah.
And part of what I really did was I looked deeper into those writings and kind of try to understand, like, why is it that people don't understand, or why is it that people still don't feel confident even when they read this. And I
Mm,
think it's because that old way of talking about plant care very much reinforced the ideas that control and perfection were the goals
yeah.
of houseplant owning. I mean, even gardening in general, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, sort of understanding the psychology of that is how I decided. Okay, I'm going to start Houseplant Journal, and that's literally what it was. It was just a journal for my houseplants.
Yeah.
And when I wrote about it, then people decide, like, they saw, like, hey, you write about plant care in a different way. It's like I don't treat them just like items of decor. I see them as I talk about the ABC of houseplant appreciation, and that
Mm,
is A for aesthetics, B for biology, because there's so much fascinating creatures, living things, right? And then C is for companionship, because when you have just like when you have a pet, you develop a long-term connection. You're not so concerned with what the pet looks like, because it's your pet, right? And so, I mean, even the same, you see my staghorn here, like, I've had it for now almost 4 or 5 years, and it's become my friend. So I know that even if I see these yellow fronds here, when they turn yellow, I just pluck them off and it's fine. Life keeps going, right? And I think that kind of attitude, that more easygoing way of taking care of plants, um, and focusing more on the essentials, is what my mission, I guess, is. And so that sort of thing happened a few years ago, where I got to write my book here, The New Plant Parents.
yeah. I saw that in the Instagram posts.
Yeah. So I mean, it like you were saying something interesting about legitimacy, right? And
Yeah.
I did not study horticulture at all. I studied engineering. So, I mean,
Mm.
I'm perfectly fine reading scientific papers and being more technical about things. And I think it's a matter of like, you read something and then you see results. And then if you're able to improve the way that maybe someone is educated or taught about something in order to achieve the results, then I think Instagram and the internet in general is a great way to allow people to do that. And that's why I think, in the 60s and 70s, when houseplants were first popular, they only had very few voices to tell them how to do it. And that
Yeah.
voice, I think, was very much perfection and control driven, right? But now
Yeah.
when we have people like you, people like me, everybody on the internet talking about the way they take care of plants, I think with the variety of voices, then people can finally kind of discover, okay, what is it about houseplants that I will really enjoy, and then enjoy it in the long run.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
really not focus only, especially for us that are also, selling plants, not
Hmm.
just to focus on, selling, but at the same time trying to educate a lot of plant parents as well on
Yes,
as you said, the journey of being a plant parent, to
that's
enjoy
right.
that, and at the same time to really accept that plants is a living being, and they sometimes are, a lot of the times you cannot see perfection in them, but you try to enjoy the whole
Yeah,
process.
that's right. And it's really it speaks to the fact that when people buy plants or when they sell them, they're
Mm,
often marketed as just a piece of decor, right?
yeah.
But But when people like sell a dog, you know that you don't buy a dog because you hardly have to walk, you hardly have to feed it. Like that's not why you buy a dog. You buy it for the relational and growing with it, right?
Mm,
And I think plants have this kind of double ability of both being items of decor, like they definitely make your space more beautiful, but
mm,
they also have this characteristic of being able to grow and change. But by the fact of being able to grow and change, it means that it won't look the same. It won't look the same as when you first bought it. It's going to change. It's going to change and adapt to your space. And, sometimes it's almost like just your ability to accept how it grows and change is what will determine whether you enjoy plant care or not.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, maybe I'll start with, how did the Houseplant Journal, started? The Instagram page, or was it the Instagram that you started, or you started something else before that?
Well, even before Instagram, I started on Tumblr. Do you know the
Yeah,
the
yeah,
other Google Tumblr? Yeah. So I
yeah,
started
yeah.
on Tumblr. I think at first Tumblr was more flexible in terms of being able to post like multiple pictures, or write a bit more in the like kind of like a micro blog. And then later I went on to Instagram as well, just because I wanted to diversify the platforms. But then when Instagram started allowing little 15-second video clips, that's when I posted my time-lapse videos.
Yeah.
And I think those just kind of took off, and I suppose you could say made me went viral.
Mm,
Um, and then yeah, it was like that was one facet of, I guess you could call it, the expansion. But the other part was just the way that I would write about plant care. I would write my observations. I would um, not write in the typical way of saying like, oh, this plant is easy to care for, and that kind of stuff, right? I don't like. I mean, I don't like writing like that. So I write about it in the way that I like to, and it caught the attention of a literary agent, and she said, I think you can write a really good book about this. And so I said, sure. And so that's sort of how it became, my like sort of one and a half year mission to write this book.
mm,
Um, and so that was the book is basically like a more extended version of like Instagram. You don't have the continuity, right? Each caption is
yeah.
for that picture, but the book was something that I really wanted to do because it really encapsulates, I guess, like a more like laying down the groundwork for how you should
Yeah.
approach this hobby in a way that will help you do it for the rest of your life. Like I don't want people to, like, the thing I don't want is for people to buy a whole bunch of plants, have half of them die on them, and then think that it's their fault because, oh, maybe they overwater, maybe they underwater, all this stuff. It all like lends itself to blaming yourself. And people don't like to blame themselves. Like I won't do a hobby that I feel like I'm bad at, right? And unfortunately, I think a lot of people think that they are bad at houseplant care only because plants don't look perfect anymore. And that's kind of a weird standard to put yourself at, especially when you consider that plants are living things, as we all know, right? So I really want people to like understand the most essential parts of plants, and in fact, right down to the fact of how they work, so that you put your efforts in the right things. But at the same time, you have to accept the realities that, your plants are going to grow and they're going to change, and that is all okay, and that is part of the experience. The best example I can say is like my old peace lily. Like, I don't know if you can see it, but it's behind me. It started off as a really tiny pot, and it just kept growing and growing. And I have this now; it's a huge 12-inch pot of peace lily. But over all of these years, every single month, I cut off like 4 or 5 brown leaves and yellowed leaves, and it's just all part of the experience. And yet, somebody who's not like tuned in with this acceptance would think, "Oh no, am I overwatering? Am I under?" Like they would constantly worry, right?
Yes,
but exactly. I would say focus on the essentials to know that your plants are growing, even if they have a few brown tips, even if they have a few yellowed leaves.
Yeah, I think that's a very similar experience also. I mean, I'm just a newbie still in terms of plant parenting. It's been a wonderful 2-year journey, but I'm just so lucky to have, people around me who support the whole experience as well. But I have that similar experience in giving advice to plant parents. They really panic when they see yellow leaves or brown leaves, and then I tell them that they are living beings, so some of it will die, but a new leaf will have to bloom soon. So you just have to wait for them and be patient about it. Another thing that I'd like to ask is, how did the whole plant enthusiasm has evolved over the years? Like, are you seeing a pattern? Are you seeing that a lot more people are interested about plants compared to years before?
Well, I think definitely social media has a lot to do with it, because I guess you could say 10 years ago, maybe, like Facebook was kind of the biggest social media, right? And then Instagram started to become the more widely used, I guess, like the thing that you engage with on a daily basis, right? So I at least that's what it was in North America here, like maybe 10 years ago. It's starting to become Instagram more popular than Facebook, right? But then the thing with Instagram is that the things that do well on Instagram are all like visual type of things, right? So that's why fashion and beauty and travel and food have always been very popular on Instagram. And I think about 5 years ago, then the houseplant Instagram started to become really popular, right? And one of the reasons why I think it's that way is because, when houseplants were first popular in the 60s and 70s, you could only show off your plants if somebody came over to your house and looked at it, right?
Yeah.
But now I can invite you into all of my different spaces, and you can see the plants that I have, right? So, I mean, in a way, it is somewhat of a mass, like, showing off kind of thing, right? But I mean, that's what Instagram is. So now people can see everybody's collection and be inspired, and also learn from other people. Like, if this other person has a similar type of plant, and hopefully if they're in a similar condition, then maybe you can glean some tips from them, right? And obviously that's how I've built my Instagram, which is that, I'm sure you can understand, I've seen thousands and thousands of questions, and that's really what has shaped the way that I teach about plant care, which is that if I'm like, just in general, any tutor or a teacher, if the students are asking the same types of questions over and over again, then sometimes the teacher has to question, like, am I teaching it the right way? Am I teaching it in a way that like addresses the actual concerns of people? And so that's where I came to see that the concerns of people tends to be not that my plant is dying, but that my plant doesn't look perfect anymore, and I consider that to be equal to dying.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm trying to get at these really, I guess, largely just assumed notions of plant care, and try to almost tell people like, no, if this particular leaf on the plant is yellowing, like for example the oldest leaf, then there's not much you can do about that. Like, yes, you can do your best, but you have to know, like, once I've done my best and I know that that is the best, then I can let nature take its course. I call it like leaving room for nature. And the idea seems like so foreign, even though you would think that, well, you're dealing with a living thing. Like, you can't even for like a dog or a child, you can't say, oh, why is my child not doing such and such? Well, you do your best, but you have to acknowledge that they also are their own living thing, right?
Yeah. I like that concept, and how I think social media has influenced a lot on plant parenting, because what I've observed also during the pandemic is that, especially during the lockdown,
Yes.
where we cannot really go out, a lot of those that are being posted on social media is food, household chores, so the sanitation protocols, and plants.
Yes.
So and after the, I don't know if maybe it's a phenomenon, but really after the, when some of the lockdowns were already lifted, there was, a bunch of plant parents who really bought a lot of plants and pots, and we don't know how to supply them anymore. So a lot of plant prices have increased. So that's why
Mhm.
I think also that the popularity of plants has been influenced a lot by social media.
Mhm.
um Maybe I'd like to go to the more basic question on how you started your plant collection. What was the inspiration on that, and what was your first plant, maybe?
um, well, definitely the plant collection started with when I was still living with my parents a few years ago. And so, the house that they have, which actually they're moving very soon, but that house had two very large skylights. So in upstairs hallway, there's like one very big skylight, and that's basically like a very big window that faces to the sky, right? And so you
Yeah.
can imagine that that place was just flooded with natural light all the day. And I think, if I had not lived there, I don't think Houseplant Journal would even exist, because when I bought plants and I grew them there, I was like, wow, these plants are all doing so well. And I want to point out too that another very commonly held mentality is that when people when people look at a plant, right,
Yeah.
and they see that it's quote unquote very nice looking,
Yeah.
they attribute the niceness to the person taking care of it, right?
Yeah.
Because their belief is that is the whole control and perfection, right? So if you see a nice looking plant, you attribute and say, oh, it must be because the person who took care of it, took care of it very well, right? Now, because I look at these plants as living things, I don't see the person's contribution as being 100% the reason why the plant looks that way. I would say it's at least down to maybe 20%, and 80% of the reason why a plant looks a certain way is because of its environment, right? So if I had not lived at that place with the skylights, and when I measure the light, most of the day is like 200 foot candles or higher, my plant would not look like this.
Yeah.
And yet, the unfortunate thing is, because most people don't have skylights, they have much smaller windows, more modest windows. And then layer on top of this the extremely poor advice to say that certain plants do well in low light. Then they put them far from the windows, and then their plants will just slowly dwindle into a shape that just looks really ugly. And then when they see the ugly shape, they also now access this mentality of, oh, it's my fault. Then of course your plants look ugly. You put them in a place where they could not grow. No amount of special watering, like as much as you may think I'm an expert, if you gave me a house where my window was only like this small, I'll tell you I could not even get a pothos to grow there. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, it's not a matter of skill. It is a combination of the skill and the environment. Therefore, you really have to understand your environment in order to have plants grow, and also understand the limitations of the environment so that you have the right expectations of how your plant will grow. So anyway, back to the question of like how my plant started. Because I had such great potential with those skylights, then I was able to buy basically whatever plants I wanted, and they would generally look pretty nice because of the indirect light being so strong all the time. And then of course, part of my background is I like hobbies, so photography is one of my hobbies, and therefore when I take the pictures, they're generally pretty, I would say, pretty nice. And so when you have nice pictures on Instagram, then that's really kind of how you attract a bigger audience, right?
Yeah. And then your first, and can you still remember your first plant in that?
I would say that maybe the first few plants was like a money tree. I got a ZZ plant, the very common ones. The money tree actually is still at my parents' place right now, and money tree is one of those plants that I like. Basically, I love really, really long-term plants that can have a long life and still look really good. And the money tree is a great example of a plant that you have to cut it back every so often.
Yeah.
It's going to keep growing taller and taller as it loses lower leaves, and then at some point it'll just be too inconvenient to take care of. And you can, as long as it's healthy, you can just cut it right back until it's a stump, and it'll continue to grow new leaves. So money tree is one of those really excellent plants, and so I love that plant a lot, and it's still at my parents' place right now.
So it's really one of the most easy to have plants, especially for beginners. So I also have my first plant was ZZ plant as well. So the very easy ones.
I want to say something about what easy and hard. Like the mentality of what exactly is easy and hard, right? Again, it comes back to people thinking that perfect equals easy, right?
Yeah.
And I look at every plant as having a different rate, a different natural rate of leaf turnover, as in how quickly do older leaves die and how quickly do new leaves grow. So for a ZZ plant or even a snake plant, they hardly ever shed an older leaf, like an older frond even, right? But at the same time, they don't grow very many new leaves all that frequently, right? Versus a money tree, which it puts out pretty much like new growth at the top, but the older leaves will inevitably fall off, right? So it's really a mentality shift to say that, if you think that you can keep every leaf on every plant for all time, then every plant is going to seem difficult to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really also one of the few things that I've learned as well. It's really how, again, social media is pushing that mentality as well. When when people say that a plant is an easy plant, and then there would be plant parents who cannot even put a ZZ plant inside their house, and it dies for them. So so it's also that helping plant parents to be more I think realistic in terms of how they expect what they expect from a plant.
Yes, their expectations. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing I'd like to focus on is what would be your advice for first time plant parents?
That's a big one, but I would say only buy the number of plants that you have windowsill space for. Like if you just want to decorate your house, then people who buy cut flowers their expectation is that, well, these cut flowers are going to die in like 2 weeks, and then they throw it out. That's it, right?
Yeah.
But I would say, don't treat plants like that. If you want to actually grow the plant, then you have to think of your indoor space like it's an indoor garden. And a gardener understands that they cannot just plant a plant anywhere. They need to consider the environment, right? And so when it comes to the indoor space, like once you've measured light and you understand, even if you don't measure light, just trust me when I say the only place for a plant where it'll grow the best it possibly can is right in front of your window. And only if the sun is going to shine on the plant for longer than 2 or 3 hours, different plants can tolerate different amounts. But if it's going to be longer than that, then you should block it with a white sheer curtain. Now, the reason why I talk about light in such detail is because if you just tell somebody bright indirect light, they're not going to understand, they're not going to have a concrete understanding of what is too little and what is too much.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why when I say put it right in front of your window, that's in order to mitigate being too little. And if you have a light meter, then you can start pulling back farther from the window and measuring to really understand it, right? And then in order to say what is too much, it's if the duration of direct sun exceeds a certain number of hours for that plant, then you should consider blocking it with a curtain. I always talk about this, like if you are specific about a certain piece of advice, then people will automatically think that it is important. But if you are vague about a piece of advice, then people will just say that, okay, then it's not that important. So if I tell somebody bright indirect light and I just kind of assume they know what it means, then they'll think that just any place, indirect light, as long as the sun's not shining, it's fine. Like, no. I say it always. You put it right in front of the window and then you check the hours of sun. You have to do both of those things in order to be successful with light. That's the very basic. If you want to get more advanced, then you have to get a light meter and actually check, how much light you're getting.
And you said the basic is really that the sunlight should hit the plant, right?
No. The basic is that your plants need to have the widest possible view of the sky.
Yeah.
See, this is my saying. The reason why it's my saying is because when people think about light, their mind is only fixated on the sun, right? But clearly, if I use a light meter, which I'll use one right now, like here, right in this spot in the room, I will say to you, is the sun shining directly on this sensor? It's not shining directly on the sensor. And yet there's a number here, right? There's a number that says 156. If I move this light meter closer to the window, the light reading actually just doubled, right? I'm now at 250 something.
Yeah.
But I still ask you, is the sun shining on the meter? No, it's not. No. But if the sun is not shining on the meter, on both cases, but I can tell you that there's a doubling of the light amount, then clearly we need to think about more than just whether the sun is shining on it or not. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Just using whether the sun is shining is not a specific enough criteria in order to understand light. That's why when I say widest possible view, or when I just say put it right in front of the window, it's because of the light meter reading getting to the highest that it can go, right?
Yeah. There is a plant near the window would have the highest possibility that they would get a better light, regardless of how maybe big or small your window is. Then that would be the measure of maybe how many plants you can actually take care in your own homes.
Yes, I would say this, after having measured light like that, then I would challenge you and say, just think about any person who even on Instagram, who you think, oh wow, their plants seem to do really well all the time. Like it basically, if anybody has shown to you that their plants grow for them indoors very, very well, and they've had lots of success with plants, I would tell you, just look at the size of their windows. Just look at how big and unobstructed their windows are. And that is the 80% reason why their plants grow so well.
Yeah.
If you have huge windows, you've made 80% of the progress already, because light dictates the growth potential of a plant. It's not how good you are with watering. It's how big your windows are, right? Or I mean, if you know how to use grow lights, then that also helps too. But what I'm saying is, we have to release ourselves from this idea that it's just a person's skill that makes the plant grow. No, the plant is a living thing, and it grows by light.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and then the other one is in relation to that as well. What are the other things? Of course, there would be people who would still want to take care of plants, or more so people who would want to have more plants inside their house. So the
Yes.
other supplements in terms of providing light, what would be your advice to those plant
Well,
parents?
yeah, then if they want to have plants in more places than just right in front of the windows, then well, first they need to get a light meter, because there's no way to understand how much light you have unless you have a number. And then the second thing is get some grow lights. So I can show you right now up here. I have like 2 T5 LED light bulbs there, because my staghorn fern is not right in front of the window, and when I measure the light where my staghorn fern used to live, it used to get between 500 to 600 foot candles most of the day. And sitting over there, there's no way that it's going to even come close to that. So with the 2 lights on there, now I can get only like slightly closer to it. So, but again, there's no way anybody could know unless you have a number, right? It's the same as like how can you cook with an oven if you don't know what temperature you're setting it at, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's just because I'm an engineer. I need to have specifics. So concrete numbers. I can't work with just high, medium, and low. It's meaningless to me.
Yeah. Yep. But again, how do we then influence plant sellers, plant parents, and the community as well, those that are interested in plants, in terms of educating them?
I think it has to come from educating. It has to come from applying the knowledge of horticulture, but in a way that is geared towards the particular hobby, right? What I'm saying is, there's a lot of education about how to grow, like do a grow op of certain types of plants in an indoor space, like if you're growing vegetables or tomatoes or different herbs, like with grow lights, like that knowledge for those people is already very well established. And outdoor gardeners, I think generally their knowledge is also very well established in the way that it's taught to them. Unfortunately, with just the casual houseplant owner, they're trying to piece together the knowledge from like a little bit of gardening, a little bit of like very advanced horticulture. Like it's very piecemeal, right? But what they need is they need the knowledge to be filtered into what's relevant to them, and ignoring what's kind of extraneous knowledge. I mean, unless they're interested, right?
Yeah.
So the only one thing that I can say is that for a casual houseplant owner who's growing most things with natural light, you absolutely need a light meter in order to make a correct judgment of where to put a plant, because your eyes are constantly adjusting. Whatever you feel is bright, it may not be bright enough for the plant, for the type of plant, right? It's very easy to judge if the sun is shining on a spot, but it's very difficult to put a number to the brightness of indirect light.
Yes, exactly. But also a lot of plant parents, sometimes it took time for them to educate them before they even buy a light meter. It's really that it becomes a fad, and then people buy a lot of plants, and then when the the education happens, there's a lot of kind of hesitation in terms of investing as well to ensure that their plants can be healthy at the same time.
You know that it's funny that you say investment, because people fixate on watering, then it's very easy to sell a moisture meter, right?
Yeah,
At least
exactly.
I've seen a lot of people tell me, oh, they use a moisture meter, blah blah blah, and I have never used a moisture meter. I use a chopstick just to poke around the soil, or I just lift the pot in order to feel like whether to water again. It is in fact the light that you cannot really sense very well. And if you understand how plants work, like the whole system of a plant is driven by light, and watering and fertilizing, all these things are only done to support the growth that is made possible by light. So that's why I did a YouTube video where somebody had asked me a question. They said, "Oh, my how come my peperomia is all rotted and it's dead, right?" And she said she even added, "Well, I also used a moisture meter to check before I watered it, right?" And I said, "Well, why don't you show me the place where you put this plant?" And it was 10 feet away from a very small window. And I said, "Well, there's your problem. Even using a moisture meter is not going to help you take care of a plant if you don't settle the light first." And that's why I say, if this person had a light meter and she would read that place as being 30 foot candles, right away she would know, oh, this is not enough light. I need to move it closer to where it's going to get at least 200.
Yeah. So maybe that's also where a lot of those that are teaching plant parents to begin educating people in terms of the mindset on the light. Because yeah, you're right in saying there that it's easy to tell people to buy a moisture meter compared to a light meter. The light meter really doesn't come as as something that is helpful to them.
Right. It doesn't feel like it's helpful, but I also think it's because people when I used to tell people to get a light meter, but then they would ask, oh, but where can I find the numbers for that, right? So like the numbers of how much light. So then I was like, oh, okay, well now I guess I had to create like a whole long list of a bunch of plants. So now on my website I do have actually now a sortable table that has a whole bunch of different common houseplants, along with listings for like the foot candle reading for like minimal growth, good growth, and then also the tolerance for direct sun, right? Because when you think about how light behaves, you have to think about all three of those things, which is like, what is my real minimum that the plant can still grow, and then what can I get good or better growth with, and then if the sun happens to be shining on me, like how long is too long, right?
Yeah. So it's a lot of things that we really need to think about in educating a lot of plant parents, because that's not how I think, specifically speaking for the Philippines, it's not how sellers sell it as well. The mindset is really just to push the plants. And even in our in my plant shop, and even in my Instagram account, that's why we dedicated this plant parent interview to also in a way educate people that there are other concerns that you have to look at before taking care of a plant, and ensuring that it will thrive in your home or in your garden. And think about specifically the space that you have and the kind of plant that you can actually put in whatever space that that's available to you, and not just buy a lot of plants.
Like, actually, yes, I will challenge you, because you said that you sell plants, right? So for me, I have never sold a plant in my life. I only sell, well, now I sell like books, right? But the thing is, it's not usually in the best interest of a plant seller to say to sort of tell somebody, oh, your windows are not big enough for this plant, so maybe you shouldn't buy it, right? Like, that's not really the common way to think if you're going to sell the plant. I mean, some people might like help the client and discourage that kind of thinking, but most would probably be like, Oh yeah, just bright and direct light, water once a week, and then that's it, right? But I would challenge you to say, if you want to sell somebody on the hobby of planting, then you want them to have success with the plant.
Yes.
Unfortunately, for them, if success equals perfect leaves all the time, then I think you have a responsibility to sort of say to them, "Oh, you know what? It's not going to look perfect forever." But that's not a reflection of your, ability to care for it. It's just a reflection that your plant needs to adapt to the space where it's living, right? And
Yeah.
if you help people, shift their expectation, then that will also shift what they consider to be successful, and ultimately feel like, oh, I will continue with plant care because I understand this is what I should be expecting, right?
Yeah. Exactly. That's what we are actually trying to achieve. But all of this process just started during the during the quarantine time, because
Yeah.
now more time to really help a lot of plant parents. One is, what we did is we created a Viber community, so
Mhm.
that it's not only me giving advice, but there are also other plant parents who can give advice. And
Yeah.
in the community, in the Viber community group, there's no selling. Even
Mhm.
me as the administrator don't sell anything there. It's really
Yeah.
dedicated for plant advising. The other one is, I encourage more people who wants to put more plants inside their home to for me to visit the house first and to look at what the space looks like. So I
Yeah. Yeah.
encourage them if I can. But there would be plant parents who don't want to do that. But there
Yeah.
are parents who are open, because I said to them, I can't help you much more if your plant starts to die, because it's really about the space, the light, and your cycle of your habit of maybe watering or non-watering your plants, depending on how busy the person is. So yeah, so
Mhm.
I do that. And then the other thing that I do is, after we kind of decorate their house with the right amount of plants, I also give orientation to whoever will take care of the plants. So
Mhm.
that's the other thing that we do, because a lot of plant parents who buy a lot of plants also don't actually take care of their plants. They would have their helper that would
Oh
take care
yeah,
of.
yeah, yeah.
So, well, in the Philippines, that's the context. A
Okay,
lot of
interesting.
Yeah, a lot of plant parents, even those that are in the offices, it's their utility man who will actually take charge of their. And this is coming from an experience of
Yes.
plant parents going to us and say, "No, I killed a plant," and then I said, "Who really took care of the plant?" And then it's the other person, or the utility man, or the house help. So
Mhm.
actually do that to orient house helps, those that are their messengers or their utility men. So these are things that we try to put in the process. But I'm just one of the many sellers in the Philippines, and I think that's also the whole point of why we're doing this interview, and trying to put as much content also to the YouTube that we
Mhm.
have right now. It's
Yeah,
easy
that's
also
good.
for me to say, if there would be question on fertilizing or light or water. I'll just give the link, and maybe for the light it would be your link, so that you can
Well, I
now
mean,
prove.
it's a good resource. I mean, it's like if you're getting into being able to measure light, then you do kind of need to compare to some numbers, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what the way that I started was literally I measure the light, but then I would ask myself, am I satisfied with how this plant is growing? And then
Mm,
therefore I would say, okay, 200 foot candles, this pothos has been living great for 6 months. Therefore, I will say 200 foot candles is a good number for this plant, right? Of course, all of this takes years to kind of accumulate the knowledge and the
yeah.
experience, right? So that's why at least when I put it now on the list, a lot of people have been saying, "Oh, this is much more helpful because now I can measure and I can compare," right?
Yes. And the other one, I actually followed one of your advice, especially for Maidenhair Fern, because I really
Ooh.
have difficulty with Maidenhair Fern, putting it inside my bedroom. So
Yeah.
I also do test plants in
Mhm.
different location in the house. So when I give advice, it's also coming from an experience where I measure
Yeah, that's good.
light, water, and all of that. And then I really have a challenge with Maidenhair Fern. So a lot would always say that it's the issue of humidity. So I
Mhm.
have two humidifier inside my room, and then I saw you, and then one of the advice that you gave was one is how the light has influence in terms of
Mhm.
growth for the Maidenhair Fern, because some of the leaves will really dry off, and
Mhm.
then watering them when you see that it's already dry. So I tried
Yeah.
it, and then I never put it outside my window because of the fear for humidity, that it might not be as humid as it is inside my room. And then when I
Right.
started following your advice, I have now new growth for my Maidenhair Fern. So I said, I now have a better way of understanding plants, especially on the light side, because it has always been, as you said, it has always been water and humidity.
Mhm.
And then there comes your Instagram, and it talks about light. That's why it's interesting also to put this out as as a content.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's just about like, you know, we need to, if we're going to start talking about these different factors, then we have to give them meaning. We have to give them concrete measures so that if I tell somebody else a certain light level, well, they have to be able to measure it because nobody's windows are exactly the same size. Nobody's
Exactly.
orientation is the same, right? So anyway, and then about the humidity, I'm going to challenge you and say, but do you actually measure your humidity? Like, do you have a hygrometer to tell you like what your humidity is? Wow,
Yeah.
today's really humid today, 70%.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
so like, yeah, I was gonna
yeah,
say
what
like, the humidity aspect is that people just think humidity is important and they just get a humidifier and they just start using it. But I'm saying to them, first get a hygrometer so you actually know what your humidity is. And then the second thing with the Maidenhair Fern was I've grown my Maidenhair Fern perfectly fine through Canadian winter indoors, and it's 30% down, like it gets down to 30%. And
okay.
the reason why it did fine was because number one, the light was, I checked the light and make sure that it was getting that whatever minimum amount.
Mhm.
um, but then the other thing was I just made sure to keep the soil moist at all times,
Yeah.
which means that I probably have to water it every day or every 2 days. And that's
Yeah.
why, if you've ever followed me, I never use the term over watering,
Mhm.
because it does not convey to people what the right course of action really is, right? Because the Maidenhair Fern, if I say, oh, if it's dying root rot over watering, but then somebody might feel like, oh, then how come I'm watering it every 2 days? Like, doesn't that seem like over? Like, the whole purpose of watering a plant has to be in accordance with the light that it gets.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the light it gets and where it position in getting the light.
Right.
And that also comes with a lot of people, as you said, trying to grow Sansevieria. a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
them
yeah, yeah.
a lot of them would say that it doesn't need much water or much light, so they put it in one corner and it dies.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with any low light plant that has been given this reputation of having, oh, like it's indestructible. Well, what I'll really tell you is that, snake plant, ZZ plant, pothos, dracaena, the only reason why these plants are claimed to be thrives in low light is because they just die slower and less noticeably than other plants if
Mm,
you put them in the dark corner, right? Like they're
yeah,
just they're just declining in health until the one day that just they catastrophically collapse, and then they're done, right?
yeah.
And it's only because you didn't notice it for that long, which is the reason why you think it might be okay for a few months.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing is that I'd like to ask is about building your own community of
Mhm.
people that are interested in plants. How was that for you and for, in your place in Toronto?
It's been pretty good. I think actually for me, most of my audience is in the U.S. So like I mean, in terms of building the audience, the first part of the building was mostly all online, right? And then when my book was released, then I decided, okay, I'm gonna go and meet people and sign the book and those kinds of things. And it was funny that like the reception for my book was a lot bigger when I went to the U.S. and even like going to different smaller cities. I mean, Toronto in Canada is one of the bigger cities in North America, right? But when I went to slightly smaller cities like Boston, Chicago, or like Omaha, Nebraska, there was like a bigger community and interest of people for houseplants. Like I mean, in terms of my audience, right? So it was interesting to see that, but getting to meet people in person and doing talks like this, but to a crowd of people about the way that I think differently about plant care was very rewarding. And like my favorite thing to do is in fact like answering specific questions, because as you've seen, like sometimes when you read the advice on Google, it doesn't feel like they're actually answering your question, right? So that's why people have been like, that's why like I like answering the questions in person, because then people feel like they're getting what they want explained in the way that they understand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many plants do you have right now inside your home, or do you have a garden?
No, I live in the apartment, and
All right.
my balcony. Well, so like right in front of me, there's another building, so I don't actually get enough sun to grow like any outdoor plants on my balcony. So all of my plants are all indoors in this solarium room, basically just a room with big windows. And there's a few other windows that I have that have a few plants. I've never actually counted, but I would probably estimate around 100.
Already in your apartment.
Yeah. So it's basically all the window space is completely taken up, and I even now have a few plants that are exclusively growing under grow lights.
Yeah, and also on the question of how does this hobby try to benefit you, or maybe your way of thinking and your way of living also.
It's interesting. I think it's I think the thing that I really like about the hobby is that it has given me the opportunity to do like further research into
Okay.
long established I guess notions, right? Like I won't even call it knowledge, because sometimes the way that something is taught, it was taught because of a certain context. Like in the 60s and 70s, they taught houseplant care in a certain way because it was just like a very low casual pastime, right? But I feel like today's people who are engaging with houseplants, they want more out of it. They see it as a connection to nature. They see it as a part of health and wellness. So I feel as though the way that it is taught needs to reflect a more nuanced and more scientifically driven approach, right? I mean, it's exactly the same with this pandemic, right? The pandemic has shifted the way that we think about cleanliness and socializing and these things. And there's been a lot of, I'm sure you can understand when you see the news sometimes, like like the things that people say about the pandemic, or about whether a vaccine is, or about what they can do to avoid, like there's lots of fake news out there, right? And you have to make sure that your source of information comes from what is credible, but also that understanding that the source of what is credible is only what is like their best knowledge at the time, right? So it's not that what they say is gold and written in stone. It's that what they say is the best we have backed up by the best research we possibly can do at the very moment.
It's something that they can only provide as an advice as of the moment.
Yeah, and so the same I think goes with houseplants, which is that, of course, on a less serious note, because the pandemic is about our health. But I mean, with houseplants, it's like, okay, what is the best advice that I can get, and applying a slightly more scientific approach to understand that our conditions, that our conditions are really what helps the plant grow, and that our role as a caretaker is really just to support whatever growth is potentially there, right? Yeah.
And then another one on, I don't know if it's branding or what, but a lot of also those plant parents that are on Instagram, they have, and this is something that I learned because of the interview that I do as well, is that sometimes they want to be called as enthusiasts or plant enthusiasts. They don't want to be called, they want to be called as a farmer or an urban farmer or whatever. They put labels on who they are, but there are also those that are collecting plants. So how do you position yourselves among those labels that are there?
I don't know, maybe like the thing that really drives me, the thing that I really love to do is in fact teaching about how to take care of plants. Maybe as a plant seller you wouldn't want to hear this, but I haven't really bought very many plants recently because I keep them alive long enough that I'm not buying like crazy. And so but the thing that I like to do is, like, I teach about plant care, but I also have very meticulously documented how my plants are growing, and very recently I'm starting to document now like how pests develop on plants. So my goal is to like have the best documentation, like actual pictures of real pests on the plant. Like, anytime I talk about pests, I don't want to just throw up a picture that I found on Google. I want to show people a real spider mite or a thrips that's been on my plant, so that they can have a context about what it might look like on their plant, right?
Yeah.
And so then also the other thing, which is more recent, is that, like, I put together an online course, and that's sort of like saying, because I have a lot of different things and thoughts and ways that I do things, and I just really wanted to consolidate into a nice package curriculum kind of thing. And so that's sort of what my most recent thing that I've been working on is.
Yeah, that's really very nice, because that's also my concept. But I think it's us juggling also our role as as plant seller, and at the same time, someone who is really dedicated also on educating a lot of plant parents. But I think mine is really coming also from a trainer's perspective, where we believe that participants can only learn so much unless there is a continuous coaching and guiding them on how it's being done. Yeah. So some few more maybe last message for plant parents out there, or for those that that follows you, or invitation also to your course.
Sure. So I would say I would like to leave people with the idea that it is a sort of false impression to say that somehow proper care will give you perfect plants forever. And I think if you throw out that notion, then you can really unlock a much deeper enjoyment of having plants around. Like, the people who really love having plants around, it's not that they never lose any leaves. It's not like that their leaves are always green forever. It's that they understand how much leaf loss is normal, and whether the plant is still continuing to grow well, right? So the reason why I put my course together, which is called The Essentials of Houseplant Enjoyment, is because it's a combination of what are the most essential techniques and foundational knowledge in order to have the maximum enjoyment with your plants. Like I don't say that you're going to keep your plants perfect forever. I say you're going to enjoy whatever lifespan they might have. And I think with that shift in perspective, then it will help people to stay with keeping houseplants as a hobby for the rest of their life. And it'll be very rewarding and enriching, which is, I think, the whole point of like the reason why people want plants. Sometimes people want plants just for decor. Like you were saying, the people who have somebody else take care of it. Well, then the person who takes care of it will be the one who derives more joy than just what the plant looks like.
And so the other thing I take as a takeaway for the conversation is really the moderation of buying plants, which I really don't mind the plant seller, because what I do is really buy plants and then I grow them and then I propagate some of them, and that's the only thing that I can sell, unless if there are other clients who would want to decorate their house, then we outsource from other gardens. So yeah, I like the mindset that there is moderation in procuring plants depending on the light and the condition that you can provide it.
And I think overall, if you approach your indoor space as having a limited space for plants, then you will enjoy it as a garden far more than just like, you bought a piece of decor and then you got bored of it, and you bought another decor and you got bored of it. Like that cycle is not going to last very long in terms of your long-term enjoyment, right? So that's what my approach and the course is all about, which is how do you get that mindset to keep doing this in the long term and basically to love plants forever.
Yeah. So that's it, Darryl. I hope that you enjoy this conversation. I don't want to keep you that.
No. It's very very good conversation. Thank you so much.